and everyone else. Good Sister Gwen did an excellent job. Give her another hand, please. She did an excellent job dealing with the science of the body. I'm going to deal with the science of the mind. And one thing that we got to keep in mind is that in addition to eating well, you have to also think well. It doesn't matter if your food is good, if you're filled with toxic thoughts. It doesn't matter if the diet is healthy, if you're suffering from depression. It doesn't matter if you drink spring water, if you're suffering from anxiety disorders. So we got to have a balance of a healthy body and a healthy mind. I get a lot of vegetarians who come to me in therapy, and they're psychologically sick, although the body is healthy. But one thing you have to understand about the mind is that every emotional state has its own hormonal milieu. And that hormonal milieu will toxify your body even if the food doesn't. In fact, I would argue that the psychological toxins are worse than the ones that you eat. So we have to make sure that on top of that excellent work that she put forth, understand that everything flows from this up here. Very important that we keep that in mind. Now I want to talk about the children. Psychoacademic holocaust against African children, and particularly our boys. What I do in this presentation is I present these questions and then I give you the answers. I want to arm you with some tools you can use immediately to protect your sons and daughter and young folk that you work with against the psychoacademic holocaust. And people say, well, why do you call it a holocaust? I said, because there's 5 stages in the war against black boys. The first one is miseducation. What are the goals of miseducation? To teach the black boy to hate himself, to love European culture, and if possible, to feminize or homosexualize the boy. That's goal number 1. Goal number 2 is psychiatric medication. The goal of public education in America is to teach the African American boy to accept white supremacy. That is the goal. And all of our young men who are diagnosed with ADHD or conduct disorder or ODD or emotionally disturbed or put in special ed are mostly there because they refuse to accept white rule. So you have to understand the political agenda of public school, which is to teach your child to be comfortable with that place in society that the American social order predetermined that they shall fulfill. Until we build our own schools, we will continue to get more of the same. It cannot change. When you study any incarcerated group of people, study any period of oppression in American history, and whenever a conqueror comes amongst the people, he takes control over 3 institutions. And if he controls these 3, he never has to worry about going to war with the people he's controlling. The first is the school system. If you control the education, you control the behavior. The second is the church, spiritual incarceration. If you control the messages on Sunday and Friday and Saturday, you control the people. And the third is the military, physical incarceration. But if you control the church and if you control the schools, you don't even have to worry about controlling the body because the oppressed will exterminate each other. See, the greatest victory of slavery was that it convinced Africans to participate in their own extermination. Black folk will fight against each other and work against their best interests without being paid to do it. So let's go ahead and pop. Now tonight, parents, especially if you're raising black boys, even for the young ladies, you need to make sure you get a copy of my book, Psychoacademic Holocaust, which is on the back table. That's your handbook. That's going to tell you how to deal with special ed, how to keep them out of special ed. If they in special ed and you want them out of special ed, that's going to help you deal with ADHD, the psychiatric medications. I got a whole chapter on there teaching you how to deal with disruptive behavior without medication. You have the diagnoses for ADHD, word for word. Learning disability, word for word. Conduct disorder, word for word. Mental retardation, word for word. So if you're raising one of our sons, you need that book. They say that knowledge can be expensive or ignorance is more expensive. And if you don't read that book cover to cover, you set your son up for one hell of a war with the American public and charter system in this country. So make sure you read it. It's the only book out there that's telling you how racism operates through special ed and ADHD, but more importantly, what you can do about it. So the first question, what should you do when the school asks your permission to evaluate your children? This is a very important question, because if you sign your name on that permission to evaluate form, do you know what you just did? Yeah. You gave the school the authority to tell you why your child can't learn. Yeah. Before you signed, it was your authority. But once you sign permission, the school can now tell you why Raheem can't read. Now you know why Raheem can't read, and it starts with you. First of all, you don't work with Raheem at home. Football practice is more important to some of y'all than reading. Basketball practice is more important to some of y'all than reading. Some of you fathers try to live your lives through your sons. So academics don't matter. It's all about athletics. Well, I got a problem with that, fathers. Why? Because only 1% of high school athletes will become professional. Only 1%. So if you raise your son to think he's the next LeBron James or Michael Vick, you're selling him a fairy tale. No, I'm not telling you to kill his dream. If your son is good at basketball, football, you support him. But you make sure he get a decent education. Because if he don't make it, and most of them won't, he has a plan B to go with that plan A. But for many of us, our sons don't have a plan B. So what happens is when they don't make it pro, they come back to Jackson and they start doing other things. Like selling marijuana, hustling credit cards, stealing cars, living off their baby's mama, etc. and so forth. Because their parents gave them what? A false expectation of their future. One thing we need to understand is that the richest people on this planet and in America got rich not by playing football, got rich not by playing basketball, but by effectively controlling the investment of their wealth. That's how you're supposed to get rich. And that's what we have to teach our children. The science of finance, the science of wealth, that's where you go. But the problem is what? We have very few schools in this country that properly educate African children the way they need to be educated. That is 6 sciences that I believe all African children need to be taught. 6. And I don't know a school on earth that teaches all 6 the way they should be taught at the same time. Number 1 is financial and economic science, the science of money. We're not taught that in our community. We're not even taught that when we go to Harvard and Yale. We have to teach black people the power and the science of wealth so we can recapture some of this $1 trillion that we let slip through our hands every year. We're the richest group of Africans on the face of the earth and the 10th richest nation on the globe. But where's your automobile? You don't produce one. Where's your supermarket? You don't have any. Where's your manufacturing sector? I don't see one. We barely have independent schools for our children. Where's our hospitals? Where's our homes for our seniors? Yeah. We don't have any community infrastructure. And then what do? When Attorney Lumumba becomes mayor in a couple of short weeks or months, we're going to put the burden on him to get it all done. He can't do it by himself. You got to back him up even when he's in office. Black people suffer from what? A messianic complex. Where we expect people to sweep in on horses and solve all of our problems while we continue eating chicken watching the NFL. It don't work that way. You have to support people as they support people. And yes, you want to vote for Attorney Chipway Lumumba. You ain't got no choice because the history is before you. Now, when people run for office, sometimes you don't know what people stand for. You got to take a guess and see if you get it right. But here's a man who was struggling for the people before I was born, and I'm 38 years old. So the proof is in the pudding. So on May 7th, you know what you got to do. And I'm not one to get up here and openly advocate for elected office. But when I see a man who got a proven record as that brother got, I have no choice but to speak his name and tell him to go vote for him. Before you gave permission, you could have told the principal that the reason Raheem can't read is because you suspended him so many times last year. He wasn't in school long enough to learn. That's right. You could have told them that the reason Raheem can't read is because he had a teacher fresh out of college who couldn't tie her own shoestrings. That's why my baby can't read. Before you signed permission, you could have told him that Raheem can't read Because his teacher went out in January on maternity leave and he had 12 substitutes from January to June. He was reciting teachers like toilet paper. Before you signed permission, it was your determination of why your son can't read. But after you gave the school the right to test and stamp your child with a link that he probably don't get or don't have, you just put in motion the school to prison pipeline. Right in that moment, I want you to understand something about psychological evaluations. I don't care if we're talking about school psychology, which is special ed in the school. I don't care if we're talking about clinical psychology down at the clinic. Before we evaluate your child, we already know what we want to put on the report before we even sat with it. I want to make sure y'all clear about this. For brothers who ever had to go to court, you know before you go to court, the public defender and the prosecutor and the judge had a meeting. You coming into court was just to give you the illusion of due process. Well, guess what? Special education, as well as clinical psychology, operates the same way. There's a meeting that's held, and the principal and the teacher and whoever else is involved, they have a meeting. And they decide, before I even sit down and touch your son, that I want him out of this class, that I want him out of this school, that I want him labeled as such and such. Y'all got to know this. The evaluations are rarely fair and impartial. Do you know why? Because the school psychologist is supervised by the school principal. So if the school principal don't like your damn son, and even though I know ain't nothing wrong with Raheem's ability to learn, but the principal want him in that class over there. So I got a decision to make. I'm either going to stand up and fight for Raheem, or I'm going to keep my relationship with the principal positive. And I can tell you, because I've evaluated thousands of children, I served as expert witness in hundreds of cases. This is what I do for a living. Most of your kids were put in special ed for no other reason than teachers didn't want to be bothered with. All right. Now, where did special ed come from? Let's go back to 1954. Brown versus the Board of Education of Topeka, Kansas. Supreme Court said what? That you can't use race in education no more. But nobody said you couldn't use disability. So guess what? 1964, the Civil Rights Bill is coming through Congress. Schools still did not integrate, especially here in the South, despite what the Supreme Court said. So then we come up to 1974. Schools still ain't integrated. You have busing going on all across America, white folks beating up little black kids because they didn't want to go to school with their children. The United States government said we got to stop this because this don't make us look good in other countries. So then somebody in Chicago came up with a bright idea in 64 called the learning disability. Psychologists said, you know what we can do? We can let the school districts resegregate the kids. But we can't say it's because they're black. So we're going to say it's because he's learning disabled. Now let me give you the quick and dirty definition of a learning disability. It's the failure on part of a child with normal intelligence to learn a scholastic skill. Listen closely. Because when you deal with white supremacy, the hypocrisy is in the definitions. Okay. It's the failure on part of a child with normal intelligence to learn a scholastic skill. If your son got normal intelligence, if your daughter has normal intelligence, how can it be possible that he can't learn to read? How can it be possible she can't learn to count? That's because it's not the child with the disability. It's the teacher or the school with it. And one of my problems is I'm getting sick and tired of us letting people blame our children for why they're not teaching. Public education is the only institution in America where the customer gets blamed for receiving a bad product. When you go get the brakes changed on your car, if your brakes are still squeaking, you take them back to the mechanic and you say, fix my brakes because they're still squeaking. You don't blame yourself. If you go to the grocery store and get a loaf of bread and the bread is molded, you take it back to the grocer. But you don't blame yourself. But when your son come home and can't read, you don't have a conversation with the teacher. You don't talk to the school. You blame Raheem for why the hell he ain't been taught. You got to change that, because American public and charter school education has created a situation where the children are always at fault, never the adults. But you got to participate in your children's education, which is why I say every black parent is a homeschooling parent. Everybody in this auditorium is a homeschooling parent. If you send your child to a public, charter, parochial, or independent school, it can be the best school in the state of Mississippi. But guess what? You should not put your child's future in the hands of somebody else. You must back up that education at home. And what's the number one thing we can do more? You said, well, what's something right now, Dr. Umar, I walk out here tonight that I can do with my children to improve their academics? Make them read more non-fiction material. When children read, they benefit in 4 ways. They pick up new vocabulary. They pick up new ways of communicating, new ways of writing, and general facts and information. Now let me ask you a question. Where is that likely to come back again? New vocabulary, new ways of communicating, general facts and information, and it improves their writing skill. When they take the ACT, the SAT, the state exam, just by reading, just by making your child read, you'll boost their state exam scores up 10 to 20 points just by reading. But the problem is we don't take our kids to the library. They got better things to do, and so do you. Which is why I say the number one mental illness for children in the black community is parental neglect. We don't have time to raise our children anymore. Half the kids in special ed, parental neglect is the reason that they in special education. Listen to me well. You cannot prove a learning disability. Let me say it again. You cannot prove a learning disability. When I test your child, the learning disability is a professional opinion I'm making based on the information on the test. But the test don't diagnose. I do. Y'all have to stop taking the professional opinions of psychologists and projecting them on your children. And now they create self-fulfilling prophecies. If your child was diagnosed with ADHD, what the hell you tell him for? A 5-year-old boy don't need to know that he got an excuse not to know how to act. What you tell your daughter she got a reading disability for? She don't need an excuse not to do her best. These labels are excuses. 85% of children sent to special ed are referred for what? Reading problems. Most children will struggle a little bit learning how to read. Only about 10 to 15% will learn how to read on the first try. So if most children will struggle a little bit before they actually grab reading, who decided that your child was learning this age? How about they just learned a little bit differently? Yeah. The difference between special ed and not going to special ed is the difference between a parent and a teacher who cared enough to go the extra mile and somebody who threw the towel in too soon. I'm telling you what I know. Former school administrator. I was at a school where we had 2 reading specialists, 3 math specialists. We had behavior support team. Kids rarely went to special ed because we helped them. But when our children go to what? Low-income inner-city schools that ain't got adequate funding? Well, let me take that back. Because it's not the shortage of money that's creating this problem. And I want to make sure we clear. Because the American Federation of Teachers and the National Education Association want you to think that the reason Raheem ain't reading is because his teacher is underpaid. Now let me get this right. Our teachers do need to be paid better. Don't get me wrong. But I'm telling you, you can pay teachers $100,000 a year and nothing will change until they change the way they see your boy. The number one predictor of academic success is not how much money each student gets. It's not whether they listen to rap music. It's not whether their pants are sagging. It's not the average income in the neighborhood. It's not whether or not their teachers are certified. The number one predictor of academic achievement is the teacher's belief that your child can learn. You cannot teach that and you cannot pay that. See, teaching is a helping profession. I'm a psychologist. Do you know what that means? Despite my 6 degrees, when I sit down with your child, or you, if you're depressed, or homicidal, or suicidal, my degrees don't mean anything. The only thing that's going to matter is whether Umar Johnson can move you from a state of mental crisis to mental health. the education is irrelevant. Teachers are the same way. If a teacher doesn't like your child or don't want to teach you, I don't care if they got a doctorate from Harvard or a master's in Princeton, he's not going to learn, because the one thing about children, they know who likes them and who don't. And you cannot lie to a child. When the teacher walks in the first day of class, that boy knows she can care less about me, or she cares. And I'm not going to throw out every white female teacher. I happen to know some excellent ones. But in the general scheme of things, I need y'all to know that the black boy academic crisis is a crisis and a lack of black male teachers and principals in schools. And one of the reasons why you're going to have to vote Attorney Lumumba in is so he can increase some of those black male teachers in the public schools. He won't be able to do it all. He can't turn the whole teacher force black, but he can probably help us get those numbers up. Listen to me. Our boys are being suffocated by feminine energy. At home all day with their mothers, feminine energy. In school all day with white women, feminine energy. When do they get men? The boy's problem is not that he don't want to learn. He want to learn by someone who looks like him, wakes up like him, and goes to sleep like him. I was at a panel discussion, and they said, we need solutions. What's one thing we can do, Dr. Umar, to increase the black male graduation rate in America? Because in case y'all don't know, only 1 out of every 4 African-American boys gets a high school diploma in this country. Out of every 100 black babies born in this country, male, only 3 will ever go to college. That's how bad it is. So they said, what's the solution you can give us? I said, real simple. Give every black boy a strong black male teacher, and you will cut special ed in half. You will cut gangs in half. You will cut suspicion and expulsion in half. You will cut ADHD and Ritalin prescriptions in half. Most of the black boy's problem is a gender-based need for masculine energy in his life. And ladies, when we say the boy needs a father, we're not saying you're irrelevant. We're saying that there's a war against black men in America that takes the father out of the house for selling drugs, but then give the same drugs to his son so he can sit still long enough to be essential. Ain't that deep? His father doing 10 to 20 for selling narcotics, but you want to give his son narcotics so he can learn who Christopher Columbus is. You want to give his son narcotics so he can study Anne Frank and Helen Keller. You want to give his son narcotics so he can study Thomas Jefferson. Black people, the only way we want to change our mental state is to educate our own children. We cannot keep trying to force the public schools to do it. It is not their job, it is yours. In Mississippi, right here in Jackson, you can take your Christmas money and build new schools for every child in the city. You can take your Easter money and build after-school jobs for every high schooler. You can take your 4th of July money, which you shouldn't be celebrating anyway, and put half the black men to work. So when we talk about fixing the problems of black Mississippi, or black Los Angeles, or black Philadelphia, or black Baltimore, or black London, or black Jamaica, or black Nigeria. Because no matter where I go, our problems are homogenous. There's somebody else always selling us what we eat, selling us what we wear, and selling us what we drive. Isn't it interesting that we are the only people on earth who do not manufacture an automobile? Every race has a car but the African. Now the interesting thing is we invented 80% of the automobile. You invented the shocks, you invented the self-lubricating engine, you invented the manual transmission, you invented the automatic transmission. The tires come right out of Liberia. I was just there in January. Okay? The minerals come out of the soil of Africa. You are the automobile, but you don't make them. You invented the cell phone, but you don't sell them. You discovered the internet, but you don't control no internet access, even though black people spend more time surfing the web than everybody else does again. You have to talk about psychological retardation and economic retardation. They go hand in hand. And if we want to fix our children's situation, we got to teach them economic science. We got to teach them military science. We got to teach them agricultural and dietary science. We got to teach them the science of spirituality, because that's our first religion. In fact, when we talk about African spirituality, we don't even like to use the word religion because it's not your religion, it's your culture. You was born in it. Okay? You ain't got to get baptized in it. You ain't got to take no shahada. It is your birthright. And then we got to teach them what? The science of the black family. I want black boys at my school, the Frederick Douglass and Marcus Garvey School for Boys, and the Anna Douglas and Amy Jakes and Ashford Academy for Girls. Our boys are going to have to study the woman as a science. When she menstruates, when her hormones level fluctuate, the impact that the moon has on her, her relationship to God, and why she was the first God before we ever called man God. He got to study that. And the woman got to study the man. Everything about him, from his brain to his feet. Know him as a science, because when you are forced to study, you learn to respect him. So if you want to repair the black family, you got to build it up ourselves. Never ever give permission for your child to be tested unless you believe that they have a problem. I said you. Here's the situation, y'all. I'm an expert evaluator. What I say, 1 day, 2 days, maybe 3 days with your child? 3 days with your child. You've been with them their whole life. I only been with them 3 days. But because I got initials in the back of my name, you relinquish your parental authority to the experts. And that's the problem. Don't you ever let nobody make you think they know more about your baby than you do. That's the problem. You are always the expert. And as a mother, you know that you carry within you a spiritual sensory device that lets you know when somebody's trying to do some dirt on your baby. And when that spiritual sensory device starts going on, and that intuition say, back off, back off. Some of y'all fight your intuition. You say, I'm in this meeting and it don't sound right. They want my son on drugs and I don't want to go along with it, but look at all these well-trained black people. We got a black principal, we got a black nurse, we got a social worker, we got the dean of students, vice president, math specialist, reading specialist, school psychologist, and now you feel intimidated, failing to realize that even though they got the degrees, you're the only person who knows that child. Never give your approach. Now, why do we have so few black mentally gifted children in America? Well, for one reason is the federal government pulled the mentally gifted money out of the public and charter schools. Before, when I put your child in special ed for mentally gifted, as a positive diagnosis, the school got money. So they like to find the black gifted kids because there was some subsidy. But a couple of years ago, they said we ain't going to give our money no more for gifted. They took the mentally gifted out the special ed register. It's still the law, but it's not in the special ed register. So guess what? Fewer black kids are being diagnosed as gifted because nobody gets paid to find them anymore. So if you think your child is gifted, you need to write a letter to the principal. I want my son, Umar Johnson, tested for mentally gifted. He's straight A's and B's on his report card. He's top 10 percentile on the standardized test, or he's at the 90th percentile on the standardized test. He's complaining that the work is too easy. The teacher is complaining that she got nothing to give him. He said school is a waste of time. My son needs to be challenged. I want to be evaluated for the mentally gifted program. Even if they ain't got a mentally gifted program, you still want them tested and get the classification of MG, because when you transfer him to another school, that MG label will help his application. Are y'all following me? Because parents say, I don't want to test for mentally gifted because the schools ain't got no mentally gifted program. I don't care. When it comes time for him to apply to college, or one of those special education high schools, the fact that he's African American with an NG in the back of his name will help him significantly. He will qualify for scholarships just because he was a gifted child. But you got to bring it to the attention of the school. Don't wait for them to come to you with this, especially if the principal or teacher is not African, because a lot of them believe in African racial inferiority. So if they believe in African racial inferiority, why in the hell are they going to tell you that your child is superior to their own intellectual? You got to fight that fight. Now, let's talk about the preschool children for a minute. Is kindergarten mandatory in the state of Mississippi? It's optional? It's optional. Okay. It's optional in Pennsylvania too. But listen to me. Even though kindergarten might be optional in Mississippi, this should not be optional for you unless you're teaching it at home. And I'm getting sick and tired of ghetto babies showing up in school at 7 years old, can't write their name, don't know their colors, their numbers, their sizes, their shapes. And when they go to kindergarten or first grade, excuse me, because you let them skip first grade, or even if they did come to kindergarten, They don't know anything. And so you know what the white teacher going to do? She's going to send them straight to me. It is not our responsibility to teach him his letters. He should have learned that in preschool. Put him in special ed. This is what they do. So you set your kid up for special ed by not working with them. When your child comes to kindergarten, he should be able to sit still for 15 minutes. Yes, he should. He should. But the problem is what? We let them dance from birth to 5, that ghetto stuff. Get it, Johnny. Get it, Johnny. And they cook the leg all summer. Okay, like it's real cute. Raising them like a ghetto child. And then when it's time to go to school, they don't know nothing about no desk. They don't know nothing about sitting in no chair. They don't know nothing about being quiet until somebody calls on you. Listen to me. If you're raising a black boy, above all other responsibilities as a parent, what is your first responsibility? To teach that black boy discipline. Because if he ain't got it, this society will eat his ass up. And what is discipline? It is the ability to teach your son to do what he don't want to do when it got to be done, whether he like it or not. Did y'all hear that? To teach him how to sit still when he got to sit still, irrespective of whether he like it or not. But the problem with disciplining black mothers and black fathers and black aunts and uncles and grandparents, the problem with teaching discipline to black children is you can't teach what you ain't got. And many of us ain't got no self-control. So the children ain't got no self-control. What is ADHD? Ain't no daddy at home disorder. Show me a boy on brain medicine, and I show you a boy without a father in his life. And if his father is at home, then this ain't no discipline at home disorder. ADHD is a discipline situation. That ain't got nothing to do with no overactive brain psychiatry. What's wrong with y'all people? My father was a drill instructor for the United States Marine Corps. Pepper Island, South Carolina. I had 4 brothers. That's 5 boys. Not one of us caught ADHD. We wasn't allowed in my house to get sick. None of us caught conduct disorder. My father didn't allow conduct disorder in the house. There was no such thing as, Daddy, I need a pill to be good. But in your house, it's different. Because you're liberated. So we get our medicine because we too lazy to teach them how to sit still. That's what's going on. And so they come to school, and you know why he can't sit still. You know why he can't sit still? He probably was up too late last night because in your house, they go to sleep when they feel like it. You know why he can't sit still? Because he had sugar for dinner and sugar for breakfast. And you give him $10 to buy sugar on the way to school. You know why she can't sit still? Because her uncle been going up her skirt for the past 6 months, and you trying to act like you don't know about it. You know why he can't sit still? His grandmother died last week. She raised the boy, and instead of you getting him some grief counseling, you told him he should just be able to get over it. And so now you stuck him back in school right after grandmama's funeral, and he looked at ADHD because he's grieving for the loss of the woman who raised him. Stop letting these people test your kids when you know the reason is in your house. All mental illness comes from your house. I don't care if you're a thief, a liar, drug addict, ADHD, cigarette dependent, anxiety, depressed, suicide, homicide. All of our issues come from the house we was raised in. So when we talk about something, one thing that the Bible says that I totally agree with, it says, the sins of the father shall visit the children to the umpteenth generation. There is no place where that's more true than mental illness. If the father was a drug addict, it is likely that great-grandson will be too. If mother was promiscuous, it is very likely that great-granddaughter will be too. Do you know why? Because it's hard to break family cycles. They go on and on and on. You are still being affected by the cycles of slavery. And the only way you're going to get out of those cycles, or the cycles of last generation, or the previous generation, is to muster up the willpower to break it. How many of you raised children who you did not want to be anything like their cousins? No. So you had to pull them back a little bit, right? But wasn't it difficult for you to make sure your daughter graduated and didn't get pregnant because all the cousins did? It was hard to break the cycle. And then when you show your sisters and brothers that you're trying to raise your children differently than your mama raised you, they accuse you of thinking you better than them. Bullshit. See that? But you got to do it anyway. Because the best thing you can give your child is a solid upbringing, even above money. And we got to stop spoiling our children too. I don't know where black people get off spoiling your kids because they don't get a silver spoon in their mouth out here. But you got daughters who are lazy, don't do nothing, you give them everything. You got sons who are lazy, don't do nothing, you give them everything. And mothers, like I told you last night, you got to stop upgrading your oldest son to man of the house status. That's right. Because when you make your oldest boy the man of the house, you're now emotionally dependent on him. And when you become emotionally dependent on your son, you can no longer chastise him because he might chastise you. That's right. That's right. Now, if the child is 3, 4, or 5 years old, and you notice that he still can't talk at 4 or 5, we got a problem. You notice that he's acting a little strange, and you think he might got an intellectual disability, or you see some autism, or you see a speech problem. Don't you wait till kindergarten to give him no help. Federal special ed starts at the age of 3. You contact the local school district. You tell them, I need an early intervention for my 3-year-old daughter. I think she got a speech problem. Now, you know I don't like putting our kids in special ed prematurely. But I don't mind getting them early intervention special ed because they don't have to go to special ed in kindergarten just because they got early intervention service in preschool. In fact, if you get them the help early, they might not need it when kindergarten shows up. Are y'all following me? But I need y'all to work with your young children. 2 things. If you're going to get your child tested, can you please make sure they can see out of both eyes and hear out of both ears? You'd be surprised the amount of black kids who are being misdiagnosed as mentally retarded when they were blind or had a visual impairment and all they needed was glasses, but because you don't take them to get their annual physical, nobody knew they needed glasses, so now they're in front of Dr. Umar getting misdiagnosed as retarded. Same thing happens with the kids who might have a hearing problem in one ear, and I'm going to tell you where that comes from. You know how they put the hearing tubes in the children's ears? The ones that's supposed to fall out. They never fall out, and you forget that they're in there. So now he got an ear tube stuck in his ear. The wax is building up. He sits down with me to get tested, and he's looking autistic. But he ain't autistic. The problem is what? He got ear tubes stuck in his ear. You know how often I run across that case? How you going to forget that your child got tubes in their ear? We got to get serious about this. And let me say this. For my ladies, when you're dating, the man you dated ain't supposed to be knowing your daughters like that until you made a pretty good, reasonable decision that he's probably going to be in your life. Too many of y'all are introducing the men in your life to the daughters in your life, and you ain't supposed to do that. Okay? I just had a situation in Philadelphia where the boyfriend was molesting the daughter. And then the mother had a nerve to come in there and say it's her fault because if she wasn't parading herself in front of our man, that would have never happened. And all this is happening in front of white folks. This is what we do. So we got to switch it up. Here's a good question. Can the school reduce your child's grades based on behavior? No. It is illegal. Now some of y'all said, wait a minute, Doc. My kid got his report card grade dropped last time from an A to a B because the teacher said he couldn't sit still. In the United States of America, you cannot reduce a report card grade based on behavior. You cannot. That's why on the report card, they give out separate behavior grades. You notice how there's the academic grade, A through F, and then you get a number grade. The number grade is for behavior. If your son earned an A in reading, I can't give him a B. I can give him a 5 in behavior, I can give him a 3, but I cannot reduce his report card grade just because he don't know how to act. But how many of y'all children are getting their grades reduced for behavior? And what you're supposed to do when it happens? You write a letter to the principal. The teacher told me that my son got a B instead of an A in science class, and you cannot reduce a letter grade based on behavior. All you can do is reduce his behavior grade. I want to change back to an A. Everybody here heard of the FERPA law? Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act of 1974. Why do you need to know about FERPA? That is the law that gives you a complete copy of your child's educational record whenever you request it. How often should you be requesting a copy of your child's record? Once every 3 years. And definitely before they transfer to another school. Because teachers put stuff in your child's record every day that you don't know is in there. There's notes in there, pink slips in there, write-ups in there. And then when you apply to a certain high school, they don't get in. And you're like, how my son ain't get in? And then the school said, well, we looked at the record.
record that was sent to us from the previous school, and it said he tried to hit a teacher. And you remember, wait a minute, that's when he bumped into the teacher accidentally when they was having a disagreement. He didn't try to hit the teacher, but that's how she wrote it. So now your son got kept out of the school that he should have got to because you didn't check his record before you transferred him. Hello? You go to the school on Monday and put it in writing. I would like a copy of my son Umar Johnson's complete educational record. This is my right under the Family Educational Rights and Privacy Law of 1974. Please let me know how long it's going to take to get the copy, and please let me know if I owe you anything. It's going to be $20, $20 to $40. And in the letter, I want behavior record, attendance record, testing record, special ed record, classroom record. I want everything in that school with my child's name on it. That's your right. Now, what if you get something when you're looking through the file and you see something you don't want in there? What is your